So before we begin today's session, I want to check to see if anyone has any questions from or comments from last week that they didn't get a chance to make or ask. No?
I'd just like to say that that was a lot of good information.
Yeah. Was it too much information?
Not for me.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
Eric did compare the circle
Yeah.
with the cross in it
Yeah.
to a medicine wheel.
Yeah. It looks very much like a medicine wheel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was pretty proud of the kid for thinking like
For seeing that connection. Yeah.
Is that what that is that you're talking about?
No, that actually is a Celtic cross.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, that's what that is. But it is a circle with the cross symbol and what's called the Celtic knot inside, which is this interwoven, and the symbolism behind all that is the interconnectivity of the Christian community and Christ. That's kind of the symbolism of that. So.
Is it from Wales or it's not from there?
It'd be from it's early, so it'd be mostly Irish. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Mostly Irish, but there were some Celtic Christian communities in Scotland as well
Oh, okay.
in the early centuries. Yeah, but mostly Ireland. All right. Well, let's begin with the word of prayer. Gracious God, we give you thanks for this evening and for a chance to gather together again to explore what it means to say that we have a Christian faith. And we ask that you would be with us in such a way that we would be inspired and encouraged. For we ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay, so this is session 2, but we're going to start where we left off last week. So what we concluded with last week is that Christian faith is first and foremost about relationship with God and relationship with one another. And as we move forward through this series, relationship is going to come up continually, and the holistic understanding of human life is going to come up continually. That's the physical, intellectual, emotional, spiritual. And you'll see where that is. Oh, here we got Tanya joining us now.
I'm really trying hard to have good relationships with much more large people. This afternoon I sat with a woman who had surgery, and I'm trying that.
Yeah.
I'm not saying I'm successful.
Well, trying is the key word. That's all any of us are asked to do. All right, so now we're going to jump into something new, and that is we're going to talk about faith. So if we're talking about Christianity as a faith versus a religion, so you remember last week we talked about a religion, and religion is made up of rituals and rules that are intended to enhance or make possible the relationship with God. But the problem can be we can focus too much on the rules or the rituals to the exclusion of the relationship. Anyways, what we're going to look at today is 3 related words to help us understand what we mean by faith. And this is a particular approach I have to try and help the students at Luther sort of grasp the concept. And what I will say right off the bat here is that it's a little bit simplified in some ways, and it's a little bit systematic, but you'll see. All right, so let's look at the 3 words. So the 3 words that we're going to look at is trust, hope, and faith. And they are similar, but they also have some unique characteristics, each of them. And what I'm going to show you is an understanding of these 3 words that's going to use the same pattern of definition for part of it, and then the other part is what's unique to each word. You'll see as we move along, you'll see how this works. The key word for all of these is going to be the word confidence. When we use language to try and express matters of faith, right, one of the important things is that we use language that's understandable by modern contexts. So words that might have been used a century ago maybe might have fallen out of use. I had an interesting experience today. So I gave an exam. It was a midterm exam. And one of my questions on there was a true-false question. And it was about, this was the statement. Christianity believes in the resuscitation of the soul and then eternal life, something like that. Okay, so the whole point was for them to say, no, that was wrong. We talked about resurrection of the body, not resuscitation of the soul. But you know what question I was asked by 3 different students? They put up their hand. I went up and said, they asked, what does resuscitation mean? And so I had to say, you don't know. So then I kind of said, I said, it's to resuscitate someone. That they didn't know what that meant. And that was another just reminder to me that I might use words that I have a clear understanding of what I mean by them. That doesn't mean that the other people do. So confidence, I think, is a word that most of us are probably on a very similar page about, okay? So that's why I use the word confidence. So how do I use it? Well, what we're going to do is we're going to look at each one of these 3 words one at a time, and we're going to start with the word trust. It's the easiest one to get a hold of in terms of this particular approach. So I'm going to ask this question right off the bat. Why would you trust any particular person? Like if you have trust in someone, how did that trust come about?
Because they've done things that are trustworthy.
Okay, so they've done things that are trustworthy, and by that, what would you mean? Like what's trustworthy, Shirley?
That would be you made an arrangement and you kept it.
Okay, there you go. So you made an arrangement and you kept it, or you made a promise and you kept it, or you said you were going to do something and you did it, right? And so that's how trust is formed. That when we have experiences with people, we come to determine whether or not they're a person of their word is one of the phrases we might use or whatever. And so this helps us understand. Now, now this is maybe a little tricky, but when we talk about then trust, how it's developed, what aspect of time are we talking about? If you think of time as past, present, or future, what aspect of time are we talking about? Where is faith developed? Oh, sorry, not faith. Where is trust developed? In the past. There we go. So here is, I think that was Eric. Let's just see if this is.
I think that may have been me. He said the link wasn't working.
Oh.
So I tried it, but if it just worked for me, so I'll try sending it again.
Okay. All right. So here is the phrase that I use to define, there's Eric, to define trust. Confidence in someone or something based in past experience. Okay? I think that's fairly comprehensible, right? Like you can go, oh yeah, that makes sense, right? Now what we're going to do as we move forward is we're going to, through the other 2 words, is we're going to use the same sort of pattern of confidence in someone or something, but what that confidence is based in is going to change. Okay, so that's the pattern. So when we talk about trust, then when you think of the holistic understanding of human life, right, it's most closely related to our intellectual being. Why?
You're evaluating the past experience.
Exactly. Okay, you're remembering, so you're using your memory to recall your interactions with this person, whatever, and then you're evaluating it. You're sort of, analyzing and figuring it out. You're using your creativity to say, well, let's see, in that situation they did this, and this situation they did that. I think that would make them trustworthy. So the example I use most often with my students is one of your friends comes up and asks to borrow $20 from you. Well, you have $20 on you. Now, this is getting to be less and less possible to use this example because no kids carry cash anymore. But anyways, you have $20, and so you could give them the $20, do you do it or not? And then they sort of think about it and they say, well, yes. Well, why? Well, because, in the past I lent the money and then okay. Or in the past, they did something and they kept their word or whatever. So that's how we figure out what we trust or who we trust. Okay? All right. So that's the easy one. Now we're going to move into a little more complex stuff. At least you might consider it complex. I don't know.
Trust is pretty complex.
Well, in a sense, but in terms of how it relates to these three, that's what I'm trying to get at. So hope, all right, just let's first of all talk about the aspect of time. So hope is based in what aspect of time? The future, right? All right. And when we say we hope for something, what are we expressing?
That you want it to happen.
You want something to happen, right? So it's based in a desire for something in the future. And this is exactly how I define this. And I say hope. Well, I try and say hope. Come on. There we go. Hope is confidence in someone or something based in desire for something in the future. Now, why do I use the word confidence here? Here's the example I give. I have a tradition, a Labor Day Classic tradition. So this is, the football game between the Saskatchewan Roughriders and Winnipeg Blue Bombers, held on Labor Day weekend. And in the past, anyways, it was always the biggest crowd. In fact, I think it still was this year. It was the biggest crowd of the season. And in the early days, when the Regina Rams were selling 50-50 tickets, that was the one game that I would buy a 50-50 ticket at, partly because the jackpot got big enough to make it seem worthwhile, right? And we're talking the early days where, man, it was amazing if the jackpot got to 30,000. It was like, wow, that's a big jackpot. And nowadays it's ridiculous. Like some days the jackpot gets to $250,000. Anyways, that's the one day I will buy a 50-50 ticket or a group of 5 or whatever it is. Okay. Now, when I buy that ticket, and I'm not a gambler, by the way. In fact, that's the only time I quote unquote gamble in the year. I used to justify it by saying, well, I'm supporting the Regina Rams, and I can't do that anymore. So I just say, it's tradition. So that's how I justify it. It's tradition. All right. So now, I would not buy a ticket if I didn't have a little confidence that what? I might win. It is possible, right? I mean, it's not an impossibility. Now, it's not a very rational possibility, right? Especially when the jackpot gets bigger, because the only way the jackpot gets bigger is if more people have bought tickets. And so that makes it less likely. So if the jackpot was $30, I'd stand a good chance of winning. So it's not a rational decision. So that should give you a clue as to what part of our holistic being it's connected to, which would be what? Emotion, right? So that's what we see here. So it's confident, but it's confident in something that hasn't happened yet. It's not necessarily a rational confidence, but it is a desired. Like it gives you enough confidence that you say, okay, I'm gonna try this. I'm gonna do this. I don't know how it's gonna turn out, but maybe it'll turn out good, or it may be, to put it another way, it'll turn out the way I want. Okay, the way I want. Okay, so now, using process of elimination, what aspect of time do you think faith is based in? The present. The present, because we've talked about the past and we've talked about the future. Now, the hard question is, if we say that faith is confidence in someone or something based in present, what is it based in? Present what? And I'll give you a clue. We've already talked about it at the beginning of this session.
Relationship?
Yeah, there it is.
What was it?
Relationship.
Oh, relationship.
Confidence in someone or something based in present relationship. And thus, if we look at the holistic understanding of human life, this is the one that would be most closely connected to the spiritual part. Because remember, the spiritual part of us is that part that seeks connection with the greater whole, like, and is longing for that connection ultimately with God. So it's looking for relationship, right, in a sense. And so that's what faith is. Now we're going to unpack this a little more so that you see where I'm going with this. But do you kind of understand where this is heading? And the reason why I'm trying to work on this is because for too often, particularly within the Protestant stream of Christianity, faith was seen as agreeing with certain theological propositions, right? So if you held, or if you said, yes, I can agree with that doctrine, you understood that as faith. But it was all, it could be an intellectually based thing. And the problem with that is that when it's just a head thing, when it's just an intellectual thing, it does not shape us into being different people necessarily. And what Christ was always interested in doing was transforming the lives of people, right? And in fact, I've seen this in action where, people will say, oh yes, I believe, for example, I believe in the virgin birth, okay? Well, yeah, I believe in the virgin birth. Okay, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they are behaving, they're living their life in a way that is centered in Christ and is, a way that would be appropriate for a follower of Christ. They're believing a certain idea, but it's not necessarily something that is transformative. Like I can believe all kinds of things about, theories, different theories, scientific theories and whatnot. Doesn't necessarily change how I live.
So are you saying that that relationship is necessary for the transformation to take place?
It's the primary driver, okay? And now, here's the other thing that we need to clarify at this point, is that all of these aspects of the holistic understanding of life, they all influence each other. And in fact, we're going to see how different things, different parts of our being, our intellectual being, our emotional being, as well as our spiritual being, influence faith. Okay? So it's not as if these are all isolated. So a better way of thinking of it is it's the primary driver. Okay? Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So here, let me give you a really clear example. I could say, for example, yeah, I believe that God exists. That doesn't necessarily mean that I would pray to God. But now if I believe that I have a relationship with God, then I will pray to God, right? And so that's one, in fact, that's probably the simplest way to picture that. Yeah? Okay. Now, anybody online have any questions or comments before I move on? I don't want to move too fast for people here. So far, so good? Yeah? Okay, here we go. So, now we're going to look up some scripture passages that are going to illustrate each of these three things. And what I did is I chose all passages for this little section here, all passages from the Psalms. Okay, so we're looking in the Psalms. So here's the first one. And so just look it up, Psalm 41-5, and just read it to yourself, and then we'll talk about how it shows or illustrates trust. And I'm going to go grab my Bible.
Psalm 41-5.
That's right.
I was somewhere last week where hope was in all people there.
And we'll get to hope, Shirley, in a minute. But first of all, trust. Okay, so does anyone know the name of the song by U2 that is based on this psalm? It's just called 40. So yeah, on one of the first albums, there's a song called 40, and in their early concerts, they would sing it at the very end of the concert all the time, and then they would get the crowd chanting how long to sing their song.
Really?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, but anyways, that's why it's called 40s, because it's based on the song. All right, I'm going to read it out of my translation. You can follow along in yours, and then we'll talk about how this shows trust. Thinking about trust as confidence in someone or something based on past experience. I waited patiently for the Lord's help. Then he listened to me and heard my cry. He pulled me out of a dangerous pit, out of the deadly quicksand. He set me safely on a rock and made me secure. He taught me to sing a new song, a song of praise to our God. Many who see this will take warning and will put their trust in the Lord. Happy are those who trust the Lord, who do not turn to idols or join those who worship false gods. You have done many things for us, O Lord our God. There is no one like you. You have made many wonderful plans for us. I could never speak of them all. Their number is so great. All right. So how does this illustrate trust based on the definition we've been using this evening?
My Bible says it quite succinctly in verse 4. It says, "Blessed is the person who places his confidence in the Lord."
So it actually uses the word confidence. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
They're talking about all the things that God has done for them, listing them all.
Yeah, so talking about the things that God has done when? In the past. Right? So the psalmist is reflecting on what God has done for himself, if this is King David, which is possible, right? Anyways, whoever it is, God has done stuff in the past. So reflecting on that, right, I say, well, yeah, I trust God, right? I trust God for that. And not only do I trust God, but when other people see that God has done these things for me in the past and that God will save me in my current situation, then they too will trust God, right? So this is important for us to recognize that trust is built up not just on our own personal experiences, but sometimes the experiences of others. So thinking about this, where have we heard of experiences of people who found God faithful and trustworthy? That we have lots of witnesses to this. Where do we have that?
The evangelists?
Yeah, and I would say more than the evangelists in this whole book, right? Like the Bible is filled with stories of people who experienced God's saving work and saw a reason to trust God. I mean, the very fact that we're reading these words that are probably over 3,000 years old, or no, it's not over 3,000, about 2,500 to 2,700 years old, somewhere in there. Anyways, we're reading old words, but we're hearing about why God is trustworthy, and then we might say, oh, okay, so then if that person saw God as trustworthy, then maybe I can too. So it's not just your own personal experiences. Those are the most powerful, your own personal experiences. But hearing the experiences of others is also can have the same impact of building up trust, right? And that's why it was important for whether it was the ancient Israelites or later on the Christians, it was important for them to tell the stories so that people could hear about, oh, so that's what happened. Well, yeah, I could trust that God, right? And that's exactly why we have the stories. So speaking of the Gospels, right? It's like, oh yeah, well, Jesus was crucified, but then he rose again, just as he said he would. That makes, he kept his word, so to speak, right? He was trustworthy. And then so we go, well, I could place my trust in him, right? So, any other comments about this passage? No? All right, let's go to the next one then. Hope. So for this one, we're looking at Psalm 62, verses 1 to 7. So I'll give you minutes here to read it to yourself. Oh, I haven't been reading the chat things because Carrie's been answering, and so I'll have to watch that. Carrie, you may just have to unmute and just talk because I might miss the chat.
I really like this psalm.
Mm-hmm. All right. So just follow along as I read it in my translation. By the way, I'm using my old Good News Bible, which you can see I've duct taped together. I've used it so much in the past. So anyways, here is the psalm in the Good News Translation. I wait patiently for God to save me. I depend on him alone. He alone protects and saves me. He is my defender, and I shall never be defeated. How much longer will all of you attack a man who is no stronger than a broken down fence? You only want to bring him down from his place of honor. You take pleasure in lies. You speak words of blessing, but in your hearts you curse him. I depend on God alone. I put my hope in him. He alone protects and saves me. He is my defender, and I shall never be defeated. My salvation and honor depend on God. He is my strong protector. He is my shelter. All right, so in what way do these verses indicate hope?
Well, he says waiting.
Yeah, so what he's waiting for hasn't happened yet, right?
Right.
He's waiting patiently for God to save him, but it hasn't happened yet. Now, there could be an element of trust kind of illustrated here. And in what way is trust illustrated? What's implied by the psalmist's words? Words like, God alone protects and saves me. He is my defender. What?
That God has done it before.
Yeah, so there has been some past experience that would enable the psalmist to say, God is my protector. Okay? So that's an example, a good example of all these things are interconnected, right? It's not as if they're totally isolated. So often hope is also based in some element of trust. Not always, but often.
In verse 5 it says, for my hope is from him.
That's right. And so the hope is not in the psalmist's own ability, but in God's saving acts, right? Now, if this is a Psalm of David, and some of you might have in your Bibles a headline that says that, right? So can anyone remember David's life story enough to take a guess at when this might be happening in David's life? That would be a good guess, Beth, but I think because there's an indication that he's already honored, that he's already a king. So this is before, so Saul is chasing after him before, but you're heading in the right direction, I think.
When his son was trying to.
There you go.
conquer him.
Yeah, so Absalom is trying to take the throne from him. Yeah. And so how devastating would that be to have your own child trying to undermine your rule, right? And that there are others that are maybe working along with Absalom, and that's why you get this line that I think, boy, that says a lot. You speak words of blessing, but in your heart you curse him, like curse. So it's like, oh yeah, they're saying, oh yes, King David, yes, we support you and we think you're doing a great job, but behind the scenes they're going like, okay, how can we get rid of David, right? And so there's a recognition here of the dishonesty that is so often part of power politics, and you see that all the time, right? And so really, in a sense, if this is David is saying, I'm not sure who I can trust, right?
What did he say?
I'm not sure who I can trust.
Oh,
Because I can't trust my own family.
right.
I can't trust people in the royal court. So who's the only one I can place my hope in? God. Right. And why? Because God was the one who David felt put him on the throne in the first place. Right? He was anointed by Samuel and all that stuff. And so David, if this is David's psalm, and it indicates that it is, that David is looking to God to get him out of this mess, whatever the mess is specifically. But a lot of scholars think that this was written in response to the situation with Absalom. Yeah, a lot of them. So you see the future aspect is in here. The desire is certainly in here. I mean, David is not wanting to be have his authority undermined and to be stripped of his ability to lead the people of Israel and so on and so forth, right? So there is definitely a strong desire in here as well, but it hasn't happened yet. So that's why it's hope. All right, so now you've kind of got how we're working on this, so let's go to the third one, which is going to be faith, and the passage we're going to look at here is Psalm 27, verses 10 to 13.
My sister used to sing about faith, hope, and charity.
Yep. Charity, by the way, Shirley, is a word that more often than not in more contemporary translations they use the word love.
Oh,
But there are some people who think that it's sad that charity kind of got made into something more narrow as just sort of giving something to a person in need. Yeah. All right, it's a short one. You don't need much time. All right, here it is in my translation. My father and mother may abandon me, but the Lord will take care of me. Teach me, Lord, what you want me to do, and lead me along a safe path, because I have many enemies. Don't abandon me to my enemies who attack me with lies and threats. I know that I will live to see the Lord's goodness in this present life. Okay, so how does this illustrate confidence in someone or something based on present relationship?
He does say he's expecting to be rescued again.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so there's a sort of a trust element that there has been obviously a rescue in the past, right?
Right.
Yeah. Think about relationship. How is relationship shown in these verses?
He's talking directly.
Exactly. He's talking directly to God as if God is right there, right? And then he's saying, what is he asking God to do?
Teach me your ways.
Yeah, teach me your ways. And just what's the second half of that verse? That's verse 11.
Lead me on a level path.
Lead me. So what is he sort of imagining? What's the scenario that's being imagined here? Lead me along a path. This is walking together, right? With God as the guide, saying, I'll show you where to go. Just walk with me, right? So this is a very sort of intimate picture of, you could almost say maybe a friendship kind of a picture, or certainly a picture of a leader and a follower. And yet the conversation is direct. It's not saying the Lord will, but you will, right? And now, I want you to see the contrast with this. So look at verse 10, right? What is the psalmist saying in terms of relationships that he can put his confidence in?
Father and mother were abandoned.
Yeah, well, if we think about relationships where, we can have a high level of confidence, probably one of them is a parent-child relationship, right? Like, very rarely does a parent say to the child, I'm not going to deal with you anymore, or whatever, right? So the psalmist is saying that my relationship with you is even stronger than that. So even if they abandon me, you won't abandon me, right? So the psalmist is using a relationship that everyone would recognize as a strong relationship, and then saying God's relationship is even stronger. Do you follow? So what I'm really trying to help you understand here is that the reason why the psalmist can even talk to God is because the psalmist has a sense that there's a relationship there. And it's a relationship that's loving, that's protecting, that's providing, a parental kind of relationship, and a relationship that is secure, that you can have confidence in. And some of that confidence is from past experience, and some of that hope is for future. So like this psalm, like the previous one we just looked at, Psalm 62, the help hasn't arrived yet, right? The problem is still there. He's dealing with the difficult circumstance, whatever it is. So it hasn't arrived yet. So there's an element of future desire, an element of past experience, and most importantly, the element of present relationship. So if we were to say that the psalmist has faith in God, we would be saying the psalmist has confidence in God's relational love that will guide, protect, lead, save, and so forth, right? And it's the relationship that's important. And if you think of the Bible, and if you think of the terms used for God, especially when we get to the New Testament and we have what terms that Jesus is using reference, right? Well, you certainly have God as Father or parental figure, right? I mean, like that's how Jesus says that's how you pray. You begin Father, right? Our Father, or Abba, right? Our Abba, kind of like Dad. And yet there's other images of relational. So the one that you find both in the Old Testament and in Jesus' stories is the image of a shepherd. And a shepherd, from my understanding, because I have not been a shepherd myself, I've only read stories about shepherds, but a shepherd develops relationship with the sheep. And so Jesus puts it this way, right? My sheep know my voice, and they follow me, right? And stuff. And so, our dog knows our voices. And so, if Merlin is barking or something like that, I can just yell up the stairs at him and say, Merlin, what's the matter? And then he will come around to the top of the stairs and look at me and say, nothing. He just looks at me. But he responds to my voice is the whole point, right? He responds to my voice. He does kind of look at me like, what? I was just telling you that the postman has come. Oh, okay. Well, thank you. All right. Once again, I'm missing stuff from the chat. Come on, there we go. Okay, let's just look at what Carrie has said here. She said, I've always found David's relationship with God inspirational. Absolute love, faith, and trust. Yeah. Where in the Bible can I learn more about David as in relationship with God? That's Tanya's asking. Well, you would find that in parts of 2 Samuel and 1 Kings. is where you would mostly find the stuff about David and his relationship with God. Okay? I can, if you email me, Tanya, I can even give you some more specific passages to look up.
The thing about David is that he did that horrible adultery,
Ah.
but he kept on going.
Yeah, yeah.
God didn't say you can't be a king anymore.
No. But what, if you remember that story, there is consequences. What is the consequence?
I'm not sure.
The baby dies.
Oh,
Yeah. So that child, it will not sit on the throne.
right.
Yeah. So, was there another one that you... Oh, it started. All right, we're going to carry on now. You guys doing okay? Do you need a break? We're doing okay? How are we doing for time here? All right, we're doing okay. All right, here's my picture. So usually when I do this at the school, I just draw on the whiteboard and I just draw little stick characters and stuff. But here's the scenario I want you to imagine. There is a toddler that has gone to the lake for the first time. The family is visiting the lake for the first time, and the toddler is out on the dock, and there is an adult in the water. And the adult says to the toddler, jump. Now the question is, will the toddler jump or not? And you can imagine what kinds of things might be going through the toddler's mind. So what are some of the things that the toddler might be thinking?
You better catch me, because I don't want to get wet.
Okay, there you go. You better catch me. Yep.
In Saskatchewan lakes, what's in the water?
Yeah, like I was trying to imagine this with the kids, and I would say, like the child probably knows water, but they know water from a bathtub, which is clear. And now, like, what has happened to mom's legs? They've disappeared, right? And a toddler can't figure that out. They just see it's cloudy and the legs disappear. So, will my legs disappear? Right? What else might the child be thinking?
Well, they might just plain be scared of the water.
Possibly.
The parent is trying to get them to jump so that parent can get them used to the water. But
Yep.
yes, the children are usually scared
Yeah.
and
So,
fearful, and
yeah.
so they have to trust that parent is going to catch them.
okay, all right. So there's all kinds of things you can see. Now let's just think of what are some sort of positive desires that might be going on in the kid's mind.
The other kid was playing, and there's that swan creature floating device.
Floating device, yeah. So what might the kid be thinking?
Could be fun.
I want to have fun.
How old is the toddler?
Well, we could say like 3, 2, 3, something like that.
And they're
That
more
was the
likely to
difference.
jump if it's the parent
Ah,
rather than
ah.
an uncle or just a friend.
Yeah, there you go. You're going exactly where I want to go with this, Murph. Imagine now that the person standing in the water is a total stranger to the kid. Just happens to be like staying at the cabin next door. But they're like, hey, kid, jump in the water. The kid will not jump because doesn't know that person, right? Unless the kid is one of those ones, and there are a few of them, that they're just totally adventurous and they'll do whatever, and they don't, it just, yeah, it's like, oh,
That was the difference I was gonna make, because like, right now, our grandson at 18 months,
yeah,
he would jump right away.
Yeah, yeah.
He wouldn't even think about it, he would just
Yeah.
jump, because he's very adventuresome.
yeah,
But when they get older, we lose that trust.
yeah, I think so.
You know, the older the child gets, because if at one time they did jump and somebody didn't catch them, or they jumped when nobody was there, or, just something that was a danger, then that trust starts to fade.
Yeah, and so as experience adds up, and the ability to analyze, like intellectually analyze what's going on here. And that's why I say like a 3-year-old maybe is a better to use than like a 1-year-old or whatever. The 3-year-old can start asking those questions of themselves. You know, like that looks pretty deep.
Yeah.
I don't think I can touch the bottom. I'll go right under. Like the child might be thinking that, right? And if you see here, now I think that child would be still, their head would probably be above water. But you can imagine being at a dock where the kid would go right under,
Yeah.
right? So, all right. So now we're just going to keep exploring this theme, but I'm going to show you a biblical example of this very same thing, where someone is jumping into the water. And here it is.
It's Peter.
Shirley, you're too smart. So this is this Peter story, and unfortunately, I covered up and I can't get rid of this thing. I've never been. Oh, hold it. Maybe I can move it somewhere. Let's see. Let's see if I can. I'll move it up there for now. All right. So Matthew 14. Oh, you know what? I wonder if I can just move it over to this side.
Yeah, you should be able to move it to the side.
No, it's not going. So it'll be upstairs. All right, it'll be right there for now. Anyways, you can see the passage. Matthew 14, 22 to 32. So I want you to refresh your mind with this story, read through it again, and then we're going to ask some of the same questions we asked of the child on the dock.
He's still on there.
Yeah, I was just checking.
He's doing a Catholic studies assignment and listening to you at the same time.
Oh, is he? Sorry. Oh, we got another chat up here. Oh, okay. That's what I like. All right. So hopefully you've been able to get through most of the story, if not the whole story. All right. So in this story, the first question I'm going to ask is, why does Peter get out of the boat? What is his motivation?
He wants to be with Jesus.
He wants to be with Jesus. Now, how is trust involved?
He's been with Jesus. He's seen Jesus' words become truth.
Yeah, he's seen miraculous things,
Yeah.
right? And now, he's never seen this before, right? The walking on the water, that's never happened before. But he has seen some pretty amazing things. Large crowds being fed with just a little bit of food. People who are really sick being healed, and so forth, right? So he has seen some pretty amazing stuff. And that's right, Carrie. He's developed a relationship with Jesus. He's been following Jesus now for a while, for a number of months, probably at the point at this the story happens. So he's got some trust in Jesus. What would be the hope? What would be the desire? You actually already said it, Marcia.
To be with.
Yeah, he wants to go out and be with Jesus. Because now remember, where has Jesus been just prior to this? He's been by himself, right? So the disciples have been on their own, right? and they're having some struggles with the water. The boat is being tossed about by the waves. And what time is it? Yeah, it's early in the morning. It's still dark. Maybe a little bit of horizon light starting to happen. But so you're out on a stormy lake. That's kind of intimidating. I want to be with the person who I know has got power to protect me in some way, right? So I think there's all kinds of motivations going on here. But the reason why Peter will make that jump is because of the relationship he has with Jesus. Now,
He's rather impulsive.
Peter is kind of impulsive.
Yeah.
And I think that's why he jumps and not some of the other disciples, right? Because I think that's Peter's personality. But now, it's not the end of the story, because what happens? He gets out of the boat, and he starts to sink when he does what? No, it says specifically what he does.
He looks at the waves.
When he stops looking at Jesus. Right? He takes his eyes off Jesus. He sees the waves. He goes, hold it. What am I doing out here? This is crazy. It's too late, Peter. You're out there. You know, your impulsiveness got you into trouble again, Peter. And then Jesus reaches out to save him. Now, here's an interesting question to ask. It says that Jesus, he noticed a strong wind and started to sink down in the water, save me. And at once, Jesus reached out and grabbed hold of him. All right, what does that suggest about the proximity of Jesus and Peter? They're pretty close. So that means one of two things. Either Jesus, by that point, has gotten quite close to the boat, or what?
Peter got out pretty far.
Peter actually, got some distance away from the boat. And unfortunately, because it's just that little bit of a sentence, we're not really quite sure what happens. But there is a sense in which Jesus is able to save Peter because of proximity. Or, to use one of the words that we used to describe our physical being, right? Presence. Jesus is present in such a way that he can physically save Peter by grabbing him. There is a Korean artist who does these beautiful, interesting paintings, and I said this yesterday, and I forgot to find the picture and put it up here for you, but he does paintings of Jesus in various scenes from the scripture. And this story, he paints it from the perspective of Peter under the water, reaching his hand up, and Jesus standing on the water, reaching his hand down to grab Peter. So you're looking up, so it's like you're in a swimming pool looking up through the water. And it's a really, I think it's a really captivating image, because it's saying that Peter's already gone under, but Jesus hasn't lost him, right? It's really, if I remember, I'll put that on the screen next week. But all right, so now we've had two different examples. We've had an example of the child on the dock leaping into the lake, and we've had the example of Peter in the boat leaping out of the boat to be with Jesus. There's a name for that, and the name, let's get to it here, is a leap of faith. And a leap of faith is the point at which a decision is made to place one's confidence in someone or something. So once you make that decision and act on it, I will say, right, you've made a leap of faith. And we make leaps of faith all the time, and scriptures are full of leaps of faith. And in fact, I would say that's almost one of the most common images that you have, though we don't describe it that way. So now we're going to look at a few scriptural stories of leaps of faith, besides this one we just looked at with Peter in the boat. All right? So here is the first one. So take a look at that, and then we'll talk about it. Genesis 12, 1-3.
tried walking on the water off my uncle's dock. It didn't work
No.
very well.
Unless it's winter, Shirley. Okay, so who's the man in the picture? Abram. And this is before his name is changed to Abraham. This is Abram. What is the leap of faith in this story?
Leave your country and,
Leave your country and go to this land that you don't know anything about.
That's what my grandparents did.
Yeah, there's a lot of our ancestors did that, right? Left the land and went to somewhere that they didn't know much about. Yeah, there was a lot of leaps of faith in the early part of the 20th century. Yeah. So Abraham is asked by God to do this act. Now, I want you to think about this based on this story, okay, what you read here. How is this faith? Thinking of our definition of faith.
We don't really see any, or do we see any history here? Like all we really see is the present relationship.
Yeah, that's right. But there's some kind of implied, like what we don't have is trust. Because there isn't a prehistory. We don't hear Abraham saying, well, you know, in the past, when you asked me to do things, and then they turned out, and that was good, okay, so I'll do this one too. That isn't there. But what is there implied by the way the story unfolds?
That God is speaking to Abraham.
Yes,
To Abram,
yes. So there is what?
a relationship.
There's some kind of a relationship. And by the way, one of the clues, when you're reading scriptural stories, one of the clues that relationship is an important thing is when names are used. Right? And so here we have both Abraham's name mentioned. It's not just a man, this person. Abraham is named, and God's name is like the Lord. It says here, but God is named too, and God is speaking to Abraham, and so there's a conversation of sorts, right? And Abraham doesn't say, "Hold it, who are you?" You know, like there seems to be some sense of relationship that's already been established, right? And so he does a crazy thing. How old is he at this point? By the way, you have to read the verse 4 to get that. 75. He's not a spring chicken. And he's being asked to move, which in those days wasn't just calling up a moving company, right? This was a major task that he was being asked to do. And the only promise is what? Yeah, your descendants. Now, what do we know about Abraham at this point in terms of descendants?
He has none. Right?
He has none. Now, I like this picture. I chose this picture, even though it's not this particular passage. There's another passage in the Genesis account where God says to Abraham, look at the stars. And that's how many descendants you're going to have, right? And so I just love this image of this man looking up. He's got no descendants. And he's being asked to move to a country he knows nothing about, but because of some kind of relationship, and I'm going to say he's got hope too. What would his hope be then? I've already kind of given you the hint of this. What is his hope?
In you all the families of the earth shall be blessed.
Yeah, okay, so he wants his family to be blessed. He wants to have descendants. Right? And God is promising that that'll happen if he moves. Right? So that is definitely a leap of faith, right? Because he has to make a decision about whether or not he's going to follow through with this. And he doesn't know how it's going to turn out. but once he makes the decision, it's going to have ramifications. Just like when Peter made the decision to get out of the boat, it had ramifications. Just like when the child jumps off the dock, it has ramifications, right? So there's ramifications for Abraham. And as we follow the story, it doesn't go smoothly all the time, right? Like, it's not like every bit of the journey is easy and when they get to the land, there's no problems there. No, there's problems ahead too. Least of which is there's still no descendants for a while, right? There's no child, right? So Abraham says, you know what? I'm going to help God out, and I'm going to have a child with my servant girl, and then God, no, that wasn't the deal, Abraham. That was, so, anyways, all right. So there's that one. Now we're going to jump to a New Testament story, and I like this one because the image is so close to what we had with the Peter one. So here we have Matthew 4:18-22. So have a look at that, and we'll talk about it. All right. So, what is the leap of faith in this story?
They just abandoned everything and followed Jesus.
They followed Jesus. And what I like about this painting is that they're in the boat. They have to get out of the boat. They're in the boat with their father, Zebedee. And I don't know if you can see Zebedee. He's kind of sitting down by the mast there. He's the older gentleman. And Jesus is talking to, now there's 3 other guys in the boat, so 2 of them are the sons, James and John. And I think, I'm going to guess that the 2 that are James and John are the 2 that are looking at Jesus. And the other one who's looking away, who knows who he is, but
the ships were maintained. They were always going back to the boats.
Oh yeah.
Like the family.
Oh yeah. I mean, it was the family business, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but the point is here, they are leaving behind something they're familiar with, right? The fishing life. They knew what that was all about. They knew how it worked. They knew how to do it. They knew how to repair the boats and all that stuff, right? And now Jesus is asking him to follow them. And what are they getting into?
They have no idea.
They have no idea.
So but at this point, when they're making that, when he's calling them, there's 0 relationship.
Now, there's the question. Is there no relationship prior to this?
Would they have just heard about Jesus?
Okay, so here's the thing to remember, that the Sea of Galilee, as it's called, is not actually that big, right? And they're probably within a sort of a small section even of the northern coast of the Sea of Galilee, where Capernaum is. That's where they are. And Jesus at this point is based out of Capernaum. So, chances are they have heard about, if not encountered, Jesus. Right? So the relationship is not nearly like the one that will develop as they follow Jesus. But scholars have asked this very question. Why did these disciples abandon what they knew and follow Jesus? And a number of them said they probably knew who he was, knew something about him, and there was some sense that that they could place their confidence in him. So there was something about Jesus. Now, there are people that it doesn't take you very long at all, and you have a sense that I can trust this person, I can put my confidence in them. Like, you just sort of sense it right away, right? And there's other people that you go, I'm going to just wait and see. And maybe Jesus is also one of those types that, through his actions and his words, he becomes like, oh yeah, we can trust, we can have our hope in, we can have our faith in this one.
Less talk and more action.
Well, I mean, they're going to have to do an action, right? And they're going to have to actually now follow Jesus.
Verse 17 kind of gives you a hint too, because it says, from then on Jesus began to tell people, turn to God and change the way you think and act, because the kingdom of heaven is near.
Yeah.
So if he was telling people that, chances are they heard that.
Yeah. So Jesus is about 30 years old when he begins his ministry. Well, 30 years old, I mean, there's a really good chance too that someone pointed out in the class yesterday, I thought this was insightful, that probably some people remembered the story of Jesus in the temple when he was 12. Right? So when Jesus is in the temple, remember, he gets lost, except he's not lost, but his parents lost him. And then they finally find him in the temple, and he's talking with, the religious leaders, and they're kind of astounded at this 12-year-old. Like, wow, this kid is pretty interesting, what he's talking about. He's way ahead of, his peers. And we have a fascination with those kinds of kids. So mine, the one that I like to talk about recently, is Joey Alexander. So Joey Alexander is a kid. He's no longer a kid, but when he first came on the scene, he was a kid from Bali, Indonesia. And he was an incredible jazz pianist. And when he came to visit New York City, Wynton Marsalis heard him and said, "You're going to play on stage with me." And then people said, "You have to move to New York, because that's where you're going to be able to further your career." He recorded albums at age 13 that were nominated for Grammys. This is a kid who did not grow up, like Bali, Indonesia, is not a hotbed of jazz. And yet he has this amazing ability. So now he's 20. I saw him on his 16th birthday. He did a concert in Victoria. I was there visiting David Hilderman, and we got to go see him. And then we found out it was his birthday on the day of his concert. And he was this shy kid who came out, and he seemed so out of place on stage until he got to the piano. And then it was like, oh, wow, that's pretty amazing. Pretty amazing. Here's the other thing I'm just going to mention about Joey Alexander, because I just think it's neat. He's also a dedicated Christian. And he, on like Facebook and stuff like that, he'll post videos of him playing his favorite hymns and stuff like that. And on his most recent album that was just released a few weeks ago, he has a version of Great Is Thy Faithfulness that is really nice. So that's why I like Joey Alexander. Now, I'm telling you this because here's the thing. People like that, wonderkins, as we call them, right? These child prodigies, we notice them as a society. So it's very possible that he was kind of the talk of the north end of the Sea of Galilee.
He could have been also talked about because he was. No, they got married before you.
Oh, that would have been long, ancient history. I don't think they would have, because.
Oh, the gossip is pretty good at Middletown.
Well, yeah, but that is, like they wouldn't necessarily have known something, because by that point they have gone to Bethlehem, right? Mm-hmm. And then they were in Egypt for a while, and so I'm not sure that they were necessarily talking about him that way. It's possible, Mary, but the point is, he might have been known. Like, he doesn't appear on the scene out of nowhere. That's the point. And so chances are there was some kind of relationship that enabled these disciples to follow Jesus. Right? Yes,
The
Beth.
disciples were young too.
Yeah, that's the other
They were
thing.
young.
Yeah.
So they wanted venture, right?
Well, possibly. That's one of the desires they might have had. Yeah, Beth?
I was just thinking too, like in terms of, like if James and John as Jewish people had a relationship with God, and then Jesus is God, like maybe not consciously perhaps, but on some level maybe they recognize that.
Yeah, I think that's not an impossibility, that there was something that they sensed something about Jesus that tugged at that relationship that they already had with God. Yeah, I mean, that's not an impossibility. But you see what I've done here with you folks? I've started getting you to think about faith in a different way than just agreeing with theological propositions, right? We're asking questions of relationship. How is it possible that these disciples could do this, right? Well, it wasn't because they said, Jesus had some great points, and that's why we're going to follow him. There's none of that yet.
So being a little bit of an art history buff that I am,
Mm-hmm.
I looked up this picture
Yep.
just now, and the metaphor that they use is he takes these fishermen to be fishers of men,
Yep.
right? And like you didn't specifically say that, but that's essentially what they're doing. Like they're just, instead of catching fish,
Yep.
right, they're gonna go catch men
Yep.
to be or follow Christ. I thought that was sort of incredible painting as I'm reading more about it. But yeah, that relationship I think is there. Like,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and then another suggestion made yesterday. So we got the two on the shore. Who are the two on the shore?
James and John.
No. They're in the boat.
Simon and Andrew.
Simon or Peter and Andrew. Right? Is it possible that James and John knew Simon and Andrew?
Oh, yeah.
And they
They
said,
did.
oh, well, if Simon and Andrew are following him. So this is another aspect, is that sometimes, just like I said, the trust that we get can be based on someone else's experience. So too can the faith be at least initiated by following someone else. This is exactly why we say, like in Lutheran circles that we're talking about passing on the faith, that was the terminology that was used. Passing on the faith. So not teaching the faith, but sort of being within this community where faith could be caught more than taught.
Association.
That's right. So it's the relationship. So this is actually the very thesis of my doctoral work is my bottom line summary is this. Faith is developed in community. Right? And the community is essential for all kinds of reasons. And so the challenge is, in a day and age where we have a hybrid community, someone thought I said high-bred as in, high society, but no, hybrid as in we've got online people and people who gather in person, right? And we're doing exactly that right now, right? How is that community experienced? How is that community able to function in a way that passes on the faith? And that's the challenge. And I don't think there's any easy answers in terms of, we just have to make sure we do this for the online people or whatever. But that's what I'm trying to explore, is that question. Because that's never happened before. Like, we've never had the technology that enables this possibility. So in the past, if you wanted to hear Jesus, for example, you had to go see Jesus, and you had to walk until you got to where Jesus was, and then hope that the crowd wasn't so big that you couldn't hear him, or whatever, right? So that's the whole premise, is that community. So the other thing I like about this picture is you've got a sense of community happening already. It's a very small one, but you've got, people who are obviously in some kind of relationship with one another, right? Yeah? Hanging in there? How are we doing for time?
So there's 12, so along the way, they picked up some more people.
Yeah, And not just the 12, Shirley. Like there's the 12 that are named, and they kind of become representative of the 12 tribes of Israel, right?
Right.
But there's more disciples than just the 12. For one thing, there's women disciples
Oh, yeah.
who follow Jesus around, right? So it's not just the 12 men. There are others, and sometimes there are more and sometimes less. And sometimes Jesus will say something and the people will go, oh, that's too hard, and then they leave. But then other times Jesus will say stuff and we'll get surprising results in terms of who says, I'm going to follow that guy. So, yeah. So, yeah, it's more than just 12. But the fact that those 12 are named also tells us that community is important. That Jesus doesn't just say, okay, the way we're going to do this is I'm just going to make an announcement and then that's going to change everything. He has to train the disciples because the disciples are going to have to go out afterwards and take the message to other places. Why? Because physically, there's no way that Jesus could do that. He could not be in all the villages, all throughout the region by himself. He could travel, but still, the way to do this is to get the community to take the message out. Yeah. So, yeah. Any other questions or comments up to this point?
So the Beatitudes that you had there on Sunday, would they tie into these people who are now becoming the 12 plus?
They would be some of the audience, but there would actually be others who were just there to listen to Jesus for that day. Yeah. All right, let's move on. This is going to be the last thing that we do today. So what I'm going to try and do in this section is talk about how all the different parts of our holistic being are involved in the leap of faith. So we've already kind of talked about this in some manner. So I'm using words that match the holistic element. So the first one is a leap of faith is energized by the emotional part of a person. Okay? So it's energized. So let's look at some of the stories we talked about. So for the child on the dock, the fact that the child jumps, right? What gives him the energy to do that? His desire to be with the parent in the water or whatever, right? With Jesus, Peter getting out of the boat to go to Jesus, what makes that possible? What gives him the energy, so to speak, to do that? What empowers that decision? It's his desire to be with Jesus. Okay, so do you understand what I'm saying with that? Yeah. All right, so then, and we're talking about something that is looking to the future. This is what I hope will happen. I hope I will have fun in the water. I hope that I can be with Jesus or whatever. Okay, all right. It's informed by the intellectual part of a person. So we do assess things. We do think about things. So the child in the dock goes, well, Dad has never dropped me before. So I think I can jump into his arms in the water here. That'll be okay. And, or Peter is saying, well, I've seen Jesus do some pretty spectacular stuff before this. And so, he's got power that I can't explain, so he probably has power to do this. So that's, based on trust and past experience. So it's informed by the intellectual part of a person. It's sustained or shaped by the spiritual part of the person. That is, what shape does the faith take? Like what does it lead to? And how is it maintained? So the child who jumps into the water, right? Are they going to stay in the water? Are they going to keep that relationship happening and discover new possibilities? Like, hey, I can float on that swan thing that was in the picture or whatever, right? Like, it's that connection with the parent that enables them to keep the relationship going, or that aspect of the relationship. So Peter getting out of the boat, what sustains that? Only Jesus. Like Peter has to grab onto Jesus in order for Jesus to save him, and so on and so forth. But the fact that Peter maybe actually even walks while he keeps his eye on Jesus, right, suggests that. So that's what I mean by sustain or shape, right? And then lastly, it's practiced or performed by the physical part of a person. So we literally have physical actions in all of these examples. Jumping off the dock, getting out of the boat, whether you're getting out of the boat to walk to Jesus on the water or getting out of the boat to follow Jesus on the shore, right? There's physical actions connected with all of those. And all of our relationships have some sort of physical connectivity. So we talk with one another, that's a physical action, right? We maybe smile at one another, maybe we console one another in tough times with a hug or something like that. Like the physical part of us is involved in our relationships in so many different ways, right? And in the case of Jesus, if he says to the disciples in the boat, if he says, follow me, then the way that is lived out is physically following, right? So it's not following Jesus. If they say, hey, that's a really great idea, and we'll do it. See you later, Jesus. I mean, that doesn't even make sense. So there's a physical component to all of this. And so that's what we need to realize too. So now going back to the point where I said one of the problems with Protestantism was when faith was all about intellectual ideas. Then you could just have intellectual ideas and you did not have to do anything physically. In other words, when Jesus says, love your enemies, love your neighbor as you love yourself. Let's just use that one, right? It's like, that's a great idea. But if that's all it is, nothing changes. But if, on the other hand, you have this sense of, well, what Jesus is asking me to do is be in relationship with my neighbor in such a way that when there's a need, I help them out. And that means physically helping them out. I give them food if they're hungry. I bandage their wounds if they're injured. I shovel their walk if it snowed and they're elderly and have a tough time doing that, or whatever, right? But it should lead to physical actions. And in fact, that's why in the book of James, there's that famous passage that says, faith without works is dead. Because if faith is just about intellectual ideas, and it doesn't change the way you physically act, right? That is, change the way you live, then something is missing. And so for Jesus, you can see whenever people are changed, physically changed, whenever people are spiritually changed, that is, their faith is enhanced in Jesus, then there is usually some sort of action that indicates that. So the story I'm going to give you an example of is Zacchaeus, who's the tax collector. Jesus goes to his house. He develops faith in Jesus at a high level, and then he says, I'm paying back everybody I ripped off. It's led to action, some kind of action, right? Or in the case of one of the many cases of the lame person being healed and being able to walk, the person says, oh, I'm going to follow you, Jesus. And he says, no, go back and tell them. Go back to your home, because that's going to spread the message, right? And so then it's going, or just literally take up your bed and walk, right? There's a physical component to the element of faith. And I think that's been one of the problems, is that when faith has been just all in the head, then we can ignore the physical component stuff. And we can say, but then Jesus points it out in the Gospel of Matthew, near the end. You have the famous parable of the sheep and the goats. And you have some people who say, Jesus says, well, come and join me, because when I was hungry, you fed me, and when I was naked, you clothed me, and when I was in prison, you visited me, and when I was sick, you tended to me. And they say, we never saw you. And Jesus says, whenever you did this for the least of these, you did it for me. And then there's another group who says, Lord, Lord, and we're going to come too. And he says, hold it, I don't know you. Well, what do you mean you don't know me? Well, when I was hungry, you didn't feed me, and when I was naked, you didn't clothe me, and when I was in prison, you didn't visit me. We never saw you naked or hungry. Well, whenever you didn't do this for the least of these. So there in that parable is a very clear picture of faith should lead to physical actions.
And there was no relationship.
And there was no relationship, really. I mean, like they said, we know who you are. They call him Lord, right? But many will call him Lord who, don't actually have a relationship. Right? So that's kind of where that leads. So now, here is the final thing we're going to see, is we're going to see the example I used from everyday life of a leap of faith that involves all these elements, right? Here it is.
Oh,
So, when a couple gets married, they are making a leap of faith, right? Because they don't know what the future holds. That's why the vows give possibilities in sickness or in health, for rich or for poorer, right? Like you don't know what's coming down the road, but we're going to commit ourselves to each other. But so there's a relationship that has an element of trust. Well, I've gotten to know this person. We've had lots of experiences together, and this is someone that I can be confident that we can share our life together for the rest of our lives, right? So there's an element of trust, there's an element of past, right? But there's also an element of hope, an element of the future, right? It's like, well, we hope that things are going to go well for us. We hope that the dreams we have, are going to turn out or whatever, right? And then there's that sense of that desire for connection and meaning. So what is the meaning of my life? Well, part of the meaning will become, when you make this leap of faith, well, I am here for the other person. We're going to do this as a team now, from now on. I'm part of a team. That is part of my identity, right? And so that's going to change the way that no longer can I just be self-centered and just worry about my own needs. Now I need to be concerned about somebody else's needs. And so there's, that sense of connection. And then it's practiced by the physical self, right? Like, it's going to impact, like, I guess I have to put the dishes in the dishwasher, or instead of leaving them pile up on the counter, or whatever it might be, right? And literally, the vows are made with a physical gesture, which is what? Exchanging the rings. There's a physical symbol of the vows which are physically spoken too, right? Like the vows are spoken out loud, and then the rings are exchanged, and so there's a physical act, and from that point on, everything has changed, right? And so it's a little bit like the child who's jumped off the dock. They can't say, oh, hold it, just a minute, that was a bad idea. Too late. It's now, this is going to follow through in one way or another. And if dad drops you, you're going to splash in the water and get water in your nose, and you're not going to be happy and whatever. But, like you can't, it's not like the cartoons. You remember the cartoons, the Roadrunner cartoons, and the coyote would run off the thing and then hang in midair and then, and then finally drop or maybe try and get back. I mean, it doesn't happen. So a leap of faith comes with consequences, right? You like once you make that decision. So likewise, for the disciples, when they made the decision, okay, we'll follow you, Jesus, that's changing things. And they can never go back quite the same way. Like, even if they, after following Jesus for a month, said, you know what, we're going to go back and just go back fishing, they would be changed. There would be a difference. There would be a difference. And so a leap of faith often changes us. And I would say that in terms of Christian faith, the leap of faith changes us in a positive way. And then the last thing I'll say is this. The problem with using this terminology is it sounds like it's a one-time event. I'm going to suggest that we take leaps of faith all the time. It's a common occurrence, right? It's not a one-time occurrence. That every day that we decide that we're going to follow Jesus today is a leap of faith. And so that's the other side of this, is that it's a continual process. But just like life is filled with many leaps of faith. So let's use this couple that we've got here on the screen. Anyone recognize them? Yeah, Ryan and Sabrina. Okay, Ryan and Sabrina. And then at some point, it's like, should we have kids? Well, that's a leap of faith, right? And could be other things too. Should we move to this other city? Should I take this new job? Like there's lots of little leaps of faith that happen throughout life. Some are just one individual making that leap of faith, but it impacts the other one, like a job, right? Okay, I'm going to take this job, but now that's going to impact, how things go, and so on and so forth. So anyways, that's the example I use is marriage, and most of the kids kind of get it. They kind of understand what a leap of faith is there. And the reason I use this example is because it doesn't necessarily have to be religious. So they can imagine this in any context. And what I'm trying to help them see is faith is not just a religious thing. Right now, this wedding happened to take place in the church, but more and more weddings don't take place in churches anymore. But there's still a leap of faith, right? And I think the kids get that. So, well, we were only 4 minutes overtime today, but we did pretty good. Last chance for questions or comments before we shut her down.
I was just wondering if you have people who write their own vows.
Yes. Yeah. And sometimes they do a really good job of it, and other times not so good. I try and tell them you don't want to make them too long. And one of the weddings I had recently, it was like a page long, and you could tell about halfway through that they realized that was not a good idea. So anyways, yeah. Anybody out there in Zoom land have a question or a comment that they want to make before we wrap up? I'm going to see who's there now. Are they all still there? Well, some of you still are. We lost. Eric is still there. Yeah.
Okay, we're done now. He has a Catholic studies assignment due at midnight and it's worth 100 marks.
Ooh, so that's...
So he's kind of cruising.
There we go. All right. So next week we'll continue on with this, as I've said before, if you have a question that you didn't get answered tonight or just comes to mind afterwards, feel free to email it to me, and then I'll address it next week. So we've got 2 more sessions, and then we'll take a break. And what I can tell you right now is I've got enough material easily for another group of sessions, in the new year. So there's lots of material here, and it'll be fun. So thank you for your attention tonight. Let's close with prayer. Gracious God, we thank you that you have called us into relationship with you, and that you are present with us throughout our lives, even when we don't recognize or respond to that. We thank you for your grace, which constantly surrounds us, and we ask that it would keep us in good health and in good spirits as we move ahead into the days and weeks to come. We ask this all in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, thank you everyone online, and thank you everyone here.
That was very enlightening.